My name's Anna Gill, and I'm going to be talking about the trials and tribulations of running a forum. We're talking about practicalities and legalities, but the things that really matter to parent carers themselves in their forums. The training was really developed out of questions that came round to the forums are, what are your problems? What do you want to know more about? And was written with myself and my colleague Karen because we have been through all these trials and tribulations ourselves. We set up our own parent forum before Aiming High, and what we've found along the way, along with a lot of other colleagues, is that there are certain things that you need to do to protect yourselves as a group, to make yourselves more effective, and to give you confidence that you are doing things along the way and in the right way. The key message of the training or any discussions like this is not to get bound up in rules and regulations, and certainly not in writing, spending a lot of time writing lots of policies. We know that being parent carers involved in a forum is very demanding, is hard work, and can be quite draining. And we need to reserve all our energies for being involved in participation, not for doing admin and getting ourselves ground down by writing policies. When we talk to forums, and we've been going around the country talking to forums and working with them, looking at the challenges, there are key messages that come out absolutely everywhere. And it makes no difference whether you've been doing this for a long time, whether you are a very established forum, whether you are a new one, or whether you are a new member or consider yourself an old hand. They probably come into sort of three really main sort of groups of challenges. The first one is internal. It's ourselves. It's our members. How do we get members? How do we keep them? How do we organise them? How do we not get taken over by individuals that join our forum because they have a burning issue that they want to drive and make us take on? And how do we try and keep everybody happy? How do we try and keep everybody informed? And these are big pressures. So that's kind of our internal workings. Another big challenge is credibility and being taken seriously. And a lot of people come along and we discuss, how can we be taken seriously? How can we model really good practice? Because none of us have done this sort of thing before. We're starting from a very basic ground level, and then gradually we get more and more skilled and we get more and more confidence. But there are, let's be honest, people out there who don't really want to hear empowered, opinionated parents. And so we have to try and engage with them and be credible. Burnout probably comes as the top of the list when we ask parents what are their main challenges as a forum. There's too much to do, there's too much pressure externally, particularly this year. There's so much going on from government. You need to do this, we need to do that. We're all putting ourselves under huge pressure, and it's having the confidence to decide who and what we are going to do, what we're going to concentrate on. And I suppose really those are the three main areas, and I think that's probably enough for any forum to cope with. What we found with quite a few of the policies and procedures that forums have adopted is that they actually turn out to be really, really useful for solving all sorts of problems. Having a policy can be extremely boring and very, very dry, and there is no point in having a piece of paper that's got a title on the top of it calling itself a policy if it doesn't have a use. So let's look at membership. Trying to get people to join and understand what you are and who you are. People need to know what they are joining. And if you have a nice straightforward vision statement or a mission statement or something that you can send out to parents groups, that you can send out to the voluntary sector, to children's centres, you can have on your website. This is who we are, this is what we stand for. You don't have to call it your mission statement, but it is something that is short and precise and concise and says who and what we are. Most groups have found it's very, very useful to have a constitution. Constitution sounds quite complicated, but it really doesn't need to be. And all the papers and policies that I'm talking about, you will be able to access on the Contact a Family website. We'd really suggest there is no point in spending a lot of time writing this sort of thing. Unless this is your cup of tea, unless this is your skills, just plagiarise everybody else's. That's the whole idea. If somebody has come up with a very, very good policy and a template, then adopt it because it's been tried and tested and it works. So a constitution is useful because if you are opening a bank account, you will very often be asked for a copy of your constitution. It means you are a constituted group and you have voted and decided on your constitution at your AGM. There's nothing more scary than that. Terms of reference are quite useful. Terms of reference are really useful for when people ask you to do something as a group that you don't really want to do, that doesn't fit with your aims, doesn't fit with your priorities. Don't forget, the forum is for you as a group, for you as a community, and your families. So having terms of reference have proved really useful. And when we've been training, some forums have turned around and said, that would have actually helped us, because we could have said to the local authority, for example, we were approached, could we get involved in working with the Parks Department on accessible swings? Something we were interested in, but actually we're having an SEN review going on at the time, which actually was a lot more important on our scale of things. So our terms of reference, we could say, this is who we are, this is what we do, and this is what we are really going to concentrate on. It's much easier to say no to somebody, or equally to push your way into something by saying, these are our terms of reference, this is what we stand for. It helps members have some sort of idea of what they're joining and gives you some credibility. We find that some forums have a membership form to join. And how you do it's entirely up to you. But we have found, and under the discussions in the workshops, having too much detail in a membership form really does put people off. They need to know what they're joining. They need to want to join. There needs to be a purpose for joining. But if you start asking too many questions, people start to think it's just another official body, and it scares them off. So keeping your representatives can be very hard. People get very tired, get burnt out. And so, again, having some sort of representational agreement form is really useful. It helps people know what they're signing up for. And when you go to a group of parents and you say, we'd like some reps on this group or that group, they need to know what they're signing up for. And if your agreement is, and what works for best for most forums, is that if people go off and be a representative for you, they do agree that they will give you the information that came from that group. You don't want reps going off to meetings and then not bringing any information back. It needs to be a two-way flow. So what we've developed, and what a lot of areas use, is a very straightforward, simple representation agreement form. And again, a copy is on the website. It's the sort of thing where you can say, I agree to abide by the vision or the mission statement of this forum and to represent them as best I can, and that I will share minutes, share papers, and report back. Some sort of reciprocal agreement, so people know what's expected of them. Code of conduct is a tricky one. A lot of forums, certainly in the early days, most of us didn't have a code of conduct. Most of us, it never occurred to us that we'd need one. There's barely a forum in the land that wouldn't have wished to have had one at a certain time. This is a very passionate, emotive world. And we do get carried away, and people have different agendas. We go at different paces. We have sometimes completely opposite different views. And a code of conduct can be, and has for some forums, proved very, very useful. It can be quite straightforward and simple, or it can be really quite complicated. It depends on what you want for yourselves. So any policies and procedures you adopt need to be agreed and adopted by your steering group. There is no point in one person coming along and saying, right, this is our code of conduct, this is what we're going to agree. You need to discuss it and agree it all together. If you don't feel any sense of ownership, no one is going to abide by it. One of the tricky, perhaps more tricky things to discuss is structure. All the forums are very, very different, and I really have to reiterate, you need to be doing what is right and comfortable for you. And just because a neighbouring local authority has become a registered charity or a community interest group or something really quite scary and quite formal, you really don't need to be. There are a lot of scary stories whizzing around about things that you need to be, that you need to be formal and you need to have this structure and that structure. We'd really like to assure you that you don't. And some of the longest surviving and most successful forums are not. They are just a community interest group. They are not a community interest company. They are literally a community interest group with a constitution. They have an AGM, they have an elected chair, an elected treasurer, and a secretary, and a bank account. And as long as you are confident that what you are doing fits what you need and what you want, don't be scared of putting yourselves into the situation of actually just being comfortable with who you are. It's not a competition, and therefore for some forums they are spending an inordinate amount of time, money and worry about going further down the road than they need to. For some, this is what they want to do. And there is plenty of information out there, and on the website there is information about more training and organisations that can help you find out a lot more about legal structures. But I think just be careful to go along at the pace that suits you and conserve your energies for participation. Having a structure helps for credibility. Credibility is difficult in some areas. Trying to engage with the local authority and the primary care trust, and in the future with clinical commissioning groups and things, can be quite hard. But if you are confident of who you are, what you do and what you offer, then go for it. The opposite side to that is when actually you find you're victims of your own success. And everybody under the sun is asking you to get involved in so many things. And that's where we really come on to burnout. It's a really good idea to sit as a group and decide your priorities. Your decisions need to be as collective as possible. If you've got a steering group, why not sit down and work out what you think the priorities should be, and then share it with your members and make sure that you're all moving forward together. And have the confidence to say, actually, we're not going to be concentrating on whatever, we're going to be concentrating on something else. And if SEN is your particular issue at the time, and certainly nationally it is at the moment, but equally if you've got problems with short breaks in your area, or access to health services or therapies or continence supplies, all the sorts of things that worry us all, then agree what you're going to concentrate on and try and do that well, rather than try and spread yourself so thin, because that's where you lose members. People just give up and burn out. I think we would say, don't get despondent though if people do leave, because I remember we went through phases of really worrying, what are we doing wrong? People are leaving. But people go through cycles, families go through cycles. You have good patches and not such good patches. There are a few policies that you really should have. A lot of what I've talked about is what's called good practice, and which will be really helpful, and you will probably one day think, thank goodness we had this document or that document. One of the things that you have to have, in fact the only thing legally you have to have, is a data protection policy. You need to be able to keep all the contact details and all the information about your members safe. It must be kept electronically safe. There's so many easy ways to do that, with encrypted storage, with encrypted sticks. Don't start emailing each other your database. Just be sensible and look after the information as you would want any information about yourself to be looked after. There are very, very good guidelines. The Data Protection Agency gives you very good guidelines and a policy, and we have a draft policy that you can use. In fact, it's a pro forma, so basically you can download it and just put your names on it and make sure that everybody signs it and agrees by it within your steering group, anybody that has access to this information. It's a very good idea, again, to have safeguarding policy. Most forums looked around and thought, well, we don't deal with children, we don't look after children, we don't need one. But sadly, it can be an issue. It has occasionally come up and been quite scary for forums, and it's much better to have something that gives you a very clear-cut pathway of what to do if you have concerns. Contact a Family has a very, very good one that we have used with all the forums. We recommend it. It's written by Sue North, who a lot of you will know, and it comes with an enormous amount of experience and knowledge. This is one policy that we would not suggest you try and create yourselves. It has got to be correct. There are lots of other things that you can think about. A lot of people get very hung up about insurance, about risk assessment, and all sorts of things. Insurance, obviously, if you own lots of expensive equipment, then it's a good idea to have it insured. But if you're not employing somebody, you don't need employer's insurance. If you are not running big public events yourselves, you don't need public liability insurance. What we would suggest is that if you are putting on an event, make sure that you have asked to see and ideally copied the liability insurance of the place that you are using. When we're talking about risk assessments, any public place where you are holding a meeting or an event for your families will have had done their own risk assessments. But don't forget perhaps that the people you're looking for and assessing risks for will be different. If you've got a crowd of children coming who have the tendency to run away, then have you got a venue that is safe, that they're not going to run out into the street? Then there's the obvious things like, is it wheelchair accessible, etc. So if you are putting on something, it's very good practice to go and have a look at the venue and then record somewhere that you have been and you have discussed these things and you've thought about it. But there is very, very good advice available, and the NVCO website is particularly strong one at giving us all the very, very fine detail of how we can protect ourselves in these sort of examples. Another pitfall that it's worth being aware of are financial procedures. And having been a treasurer, it can be quite a scary position, and taking on different positions can be hard. Persuading people to take on something can be hard. So perhaps before we even talk about financial issues, it's a good idea to have a little brief job description of what you would expect your treasurer to do, and your secretary and your chair, because otherwise nobody will take it on because they don't know where the job starts, or much more importantly, where it stops. For treasurer, one of the things you do need to do is you need to protect yourself, to make sure that you have some sort of financial procedures that make sure that you are covered. What I'd recommend is that you agree in your steering group an amount, a lot of forums agreed something like £200, that the chair and treasurer and your two signatories can sign off. So that if you are paying for refreshments at a meeting or buying printer ink or something, your two signatories, you always have two signatories. Never ever set up a bank account where just one person can sign away your money. You can sign it off and you keep your records and everything's fine. But then perhaps have a look at having an agreement of who also needs to get involved if the money spent is higher than that, and have a written agreement which is documented and minuted in a steering group. It doesn't need to be a formal policy, but it is minuted somewhere that say between £200 and £500, certain number of officers within the forum would have to agree that spend. And then if it's over a certain amount and you agree what's comfortable for you, it has to be a steering group decision, so that all your spends are clearly decided and accounted for. And then very simple process of keeping a good bank balance, keep copies of all your receipts and all your spending. Obviously you'll be needing to copy all these to send in to Contact Family at the end of the year. And what I've done, which I like as treasurer, is I have somebody else on the steering group come whenever they want, just dip into all the financial papers, and so that they can look at a receipt or a bill and they can match it against the bank statement, match it against my database, and just do a bit of double checking for your own protection. It's well worth doing. So I suppose the key message is don't spend ages writing policies. Adopt things that other people have used. Even if you think there's a policy that you think you would never ever use in a million years, please just have it, agree it, discuss it, file it away for a rainy day, and hopefully you'll never need it. And the only final thing really is your policies do need reviewing. You do need to decide whether you are going to look at them yearly or every 2 years. You'll probably have parents in your groups that have been parent governors at schools. And it's quite easy really to just copy the same sort of format that they do in schools and have a rolling programme. And so probably finally, you're sitting there thinking there's an awful lot to take on. If you have an away day or a development meeting or something, it's a very, very good way of moving a forum on, reviewing what you're doing, looking at what you're good at, why you're stuck, if you are stuck, and what policies might help you. Sometimes you might find that having an external person coming in really helps you, particularly if you're going through a tricky patch. And again, on the Contact a Family website, there is a list of trainers who will come and very happily help you unpick some of the challenges that we get involved in forums. But above all, just keep going and do the best we can.